In the 1960s and 1970s, American dessert tables looked very different from what we know today. Families gathered around sweets that were homemade, proudly served, and deeply tied to the era's culture, advertising, and kitchen traditions. These desserts were not side dishes. They were centerpieces, symbols of care, and proof that a household was keeping up with the times. Today, most of these desserts have quietly disappeared. They are missing from bakeries, absent from cookbooks, and rarely remembered by younger generations. Their disappearance was not accidental. Changing tastes, industrial shortcuts, and modern convenience slowly pushed them out of everyday life. What was once common became unfamiliar, then forgotten. This video matters because these desserts tell a larger story. They reflect how American families cooked, celebrated, and connected during two transformative decades. Each dessert you are about to see was once trusted, loved, and repeated in millions of homes. By the end of this video, you will understand not only what these desserts were, but why they vanished and what was lost when they did. Stay with me, because some of these desserts will surprise you, and others may unlock memories you did not expect to return. Tunnel of fudge cake. The tunnel of fudge cake was a sensation in the 1960s, emerging from a Pillsbury recipe contest that captured the imagination of home bakers across America. It is not merely a chocolate cake. It is a chocolate cake with a molten center, a fudge tunnel that runs through the middle, surprising every eater with its richness. Families lined up at the kitchen table, eager to see the dark, decadent surprise hidden within a familiar cake. This cake reflected more than just culinary creativity. It represented the post-war fascination with convenience and novelty. Home cooks wanted desserts that looked impressive but could be made with packaged ingredients and limited time. The tunnel of fudge cake fulfilled both desires. It was easy to assemble, required common pantry staples, yet produced a result that felt extravagant, even luxurious. For children, it became a magic cake. For parents, it was a proof of baking skill without hours of labor. Despite its popularity, the cake gradually faded from households. The rise of boxed brownies, frozen desserts, and the preference for simpler chocolate cakes diminished its appeal. Many remembered the cake with nostalgia, yet few continued to bake it regularly. Its complexity, while modest, seemed unnecessary in an era of increasingly convenient sweets. The tunnel of fudge cake is significant because it illustrates a moment when American desserts were experimental yet accessible. It shows how a single recipe could influence the habits of home bakers nationwide and become a cultural reference point. Today, it is mostly a memory, rarely reproduced outside historical cookbooks or vintage food blogs. By remembering the tunnel of fudge cake, we honor the ingenuity of mid-century baking and the joy that a single dessert could bring to countless American families. Its story is a reminder that desserts are not only food, they are time capsules. Sock-it-to-me cake. The sock-it-to-me cake was a defining dessert of the late 1960s, a period when novelty baking captured the imagination of home cooks. It is a bundt-style cake, often made in layered colors or with surprising fillings, designed to create a dramatic effect when sliced. The name itself promised excitement, and families were eager to experience the theatrical reveal of this unusual cake. It was not merely a sweet treat, it was an event on the dining table. This cake emerged during a time of experimentation and showmanship in American kitchens. Cookbooks and advertisements encouraged housewives and homemakers to add flair to everyday baking. Sock-it-to-me cakes combined practicality with spectacle. They used readily available ingredients, yet the presentation made them appear sophisticated. The act of cutting the cake, revealing hidden layers or embedded fillings, was central to its appeal. Children waited with anticipation, while adults appreciated the artistry and creativity that the cake displayed. Its decline is tied to changing culinary priorities. By the late 1970s, packaged desserts, simpler cakes, and ready-made treats began to dominate. The effort required to bake a sock-it-to-me cake, while modest, became less appealing in a society increasingly drawn to convenience. Modern bakers rarely reproduce the recipe, and it has largely vanished from family gatherings, surviving only in vintage cookbooks and nostalgic recollections. The sake cake is important because it reflects the playful spirit of mid-century American baking. It demonstrates how food could entertain as well as nourish. It was more than dessert. It was a statement of creativity, a celebration of color, texture, and surprise. By remembering it, we preserve an aspect of culinary history that emphasized both ingenuity and joy. This dessert, like many others of its era, reminds us that food carries culture. Each slice of the sake cake tells a story of family gatherings, laughter, and a time when baking was an expression of personality as much as it was a necessity. Tomato soup cake. The tomato soup cake was a surprising and inventive dessert that gained popularity in American kitchens during the 1960s and early 1970s. At first glance, the idea of using tomato soup in a sweet cake may seem unusual, yet it produced a moist, tender crumb and a subtle depth of flavor that chocolate alone could not achieve. Families embraced it as both economical and novel, and it became a conversation piece at many tables. This cake represents the resourcefulness of mid-century home cooks. During this period, convenience and experimentation often went hand in hand. Tomato soup was a common pantry item, readily available in cans, and using it in baking demonstrated ingenuity. By substituting part of the liquid with tomato soup, bakers achieved a soft, rich texture without additional fats or oils. For children and adults alike, it combined familiarity with novelty, comforting soup flavors in the guise of dessert. Despite its ingenuity, the tomato soup cake gradually fell out of favor. The rise of purely chocolate-based cakes, boxed mixes, and frozen desserts rendered it unusual, even suspect, in the eyes of a modern palate. Many families who once enjoyed it forgot the recipe entirely. Today, it survives mostly in vintage cookbooks or in the memories of those who grew up tasting its unique combination of sweet and savory notes. The significance of the tomato soup cake extends beyond its ingredients. It illustrates a time when American baking was experimental, yet practical. Home cooks sought to maximize flavor, minimize cost, and impress guests with creativity. Each slice told a story of innovation, resilience, and curiosity in the kitchen. Remembering this cake preserves a piece of culinary history that challenges modern assumptions about desserts. It reminds us that American families once embraced recipes that combined practicality, surprise, and delight, and that even the most unconventional ingredients could become cherished traditions. Icebox cake. The icebox cake was one of the most iconic no-bake desserts of the 1960s and 1970s. It was composed of layers of thin cookies or graham crackers alternated with whipped cream or pudding, chilled until the cookies softened and melded with the cream. The result was a delicate, creamy dessert that required no oven and could be prepared in advance. For families with busy schedules or limited kitchen resources, the icebox cake offered convenience without sacrificing elegance or taste. This dessert reflects a period in American culinary history when refrigeration became central to the home kitchen. The rise of the icebox, and later, electric refrigerators, allowed desserts to be set and served cold, transforming the way Americans approached baking. The icebox cake encouraged creativity, as bakers experimented with chocolate wafers, vanilla wafers, or even fruit fillings. Children were often involved in assembly, making it a dessert that combined practicality with family participation. Despite its widespread popularity, the icebox cake declined with the rise of commercially produced desserts and single-serve options. The effort to layer and chill, though minimal, was sometimes bypassed in favor of instant puddings, cakes from mixes, or refrigerated pies. Over time, this once-beloved dessert became largely absent from family tables, remembered mostly through cookbooks and faded photographs. The icebox cake is historically significant because it illustrates the intersection of convenience, innovation, and taste in mid-century American baking. It demonstrates how technology, refrigeration, shaped culinary practices and inspired new forms of desserts that were both visually appealing and satisfying. Remembering the icebox cake is not merely an exercise in nostalgia. It preserves a culinary tradition that valued creativity, accessibility, and shared experience. Each slice represents a moment in time when American families explored new techniques, embraced modern conveniences, and found joy in desserts that were simple, inventive, and comforting. Ambrosia with sour cream. Ambrosia salad was a staple of American dessert tables during the 1960s and 1970s, but a specific variation, ambrosia with sour cream, offered a richer, tangier flavor that distinguished it from the standard version. Traditionally composed of canned fruits such as pineapple and mandarin oranges, shredded coconut, and miniature marshmallows, the addition of sour cream created a creamy, slightly tangy consistency. Families served it during holidays, potlucks, and Sunday dinners, where it was admired for both its taste and vibrant appearance. This dessert reflects the ingenuity and experimentation characteristic of mid-century American kitchens. Home cooks frequently adapted traditional recipes to suit evolving tastes or household preferences. The use of sour cream was practical, as it was widely available and added moisture and flavor without requiring complicated preparation. Ambrosia with sour cream became a symbol of resourcefulness, turning simple, canned ingredients into a dish that felt celebratory and indulgent. Despite its popularity, this version of ambrosia gradually declined. Changing dietary trends, the rise of lighter, gelatin-based desserts, and the increasing popularity of packaged, pre-made options diminished its presence. Many younger generations are unfamiliar with this tangy, creamy variation, though it remains a cherished memory for those who experienced it firsthand. Ambrosia with sour cream is significant because it represents a moment when creativity, convenience, and presentation converged. It demonstrates how American families used what was available to create visually appealing and flavorful desserts, emphasizing both practicality and care. By revisiting this dish, we preserve an element of culinary history that celebrates ingenuity and familial tradition. Each serving of ambrosia with sour cream reminds us that desserts were not only about taste but also about cultural practices, shared experiences, and the joy of bringing a table together with imagination and care. Jell-O pudding poke cake. The Jell-O pudding poke cake was a defining dessert of the late 1960s and 1970s, combining simplicity, flavor, and a striking presentation. The cake was baked, cooled, and then pricked with a fork or skewer so that sweetened pudding or flavored gelatin could seep into its layers. The result was a moist, infused cake that held both visual appeal and unexpected flavor. Families marveled at the transformation, as an ordinary cake turned into a soft, flavorful dessert almost magically. This dessert exemplifies the creative experimentation of mid-century American home baking. Convenience was essential during this era, and boxed cake mixes and instant puddings were widely embraced. Yet, the Jell-O pudding poke cake offered more than ease. It invited innovation. Bakers could choose chocolate, vanilla, or fruit-flavored puddings, and the gelatin or pudding that filled the cake created textures that were unusual for the time. Children were especially captivated by the surprise inside, while adults appreciated the ease of preparation combined with a polished result. The decline of this dessert came with shifting culinary preferences. As pre-made desserts became increasingly available, and as home cooks sought faster alternatives, the ritual of baking, cooling, and poking the cake became less common. Many families who once relied on this dessert gradually abandoned it, leaving it largely forgotten outside vintage cookbooks and nostalgic recollections. The Jell-O pudding poke cake is historically significant because it demonstrates the mid-century desire to combine practicality with creativity. It shows how American families embraced experimentation while navigating the constraints of time and available ingredients. Remembering this dessert preserves a chapter of culinary history where playfulness, innovation, and family engagement were central. Each slice of Jell-O pudding poke cake recalls the excitement of discovery, the delight of texture and flavor, and the enduring cultural impact of mid-century desserts. Whipped cream mold desserts. Whipped cream mold desserts were a striking feature of American kitchens during the 1960s and 1970s. These desserts, often set in decorative gelatin or pudding molds, showcased a combination of light, airy whipped cream with fruits, nuts, or flavored gelatin. They were designed not only to delight the palate but also to impress visually, creating a centerpiece that elevated even a modest family meal. These desserts reflect the creativity and presentation-focused mindset of mid-century American home cooks. The molds allowed for innovation in shape, color, and texture, while whipped cream provided a versatile base. Home bakers experimented with layers, incorporating canned fruits, marshmallows, or crushed cookies. The process required care, but it rewarded the baker with a dessert that seemed sophisticated and celebratory. Children and guests alike were drawn to the elegant shapes and soft, creamy texture, often exclaiming in delight at the unveiling of each molded dessert. Despite their popularity, whipped cream mold desserts began to disappear by the late 1970s and 1980s. The effort required, though not excessive, became less appealing in a society increasingly favoring convenience and prepackaged treats. As refrigeration improved and desserts became more individual serving-oriented, the communal, showy nature of molded whipped cream desserts gradually faded from everyday practice. The historical significance of these desserts lies in their combination of aesthetics and taste. They illustrate a period when home baking emphasized not only flavor but also artistry, and when desserts were meant to create memories through both appearance and consumption. Remembering whipped cream mold desserts preserves a portion of culinary history where elegance, experimentation, and family engagement were intertwined. Each molded creation tells a story of mid-century ingenuity, the care invested in presentation, and the delight of sharing a visually captivating and delicious dessert at the heart of American family gatherings. Chiffon pie variations. Chiffon pies were a celebrated dessert of the 1960s and 1970s, offering a light, airy alternative to traditional cream pies. These pies combined beaten egg whites with flavored gelatin or custard to create a delicate, fluffy texture that became a hallmark of mid-century baking. Popular variations included chocolate, lemon, and coffee flavors, each crafted to delight the eye and the palate. Families often presented these pies during holidays, dinner parties, and special occasions, where their light texture and elegant presentation made them highly desirable. The popularity of chiffon pies reflects the era's fascination with innovation and refinement in the kitchen. Home cooks were encouraged to experiment with texture, layering, and flavor, using accessible ingredients such as gelatin, eggs, and canned fruits. The chiffon pie allowed for both creativity and practicality, as it could be prepared in advance and chilled until needed. Children were often captivated by the soft, airy consistency, while adults appreciated the skill required to achieve the perfect lightness without deflating the filling. Despite their widespread appeal, chiffon pies gradually declined in popularity. The rise of simpler, faster desserts, pre-made pies, and increasingly sweetened options made the delicate process of chiffon pie preparation less common. Many families who once prided themselves on mastering these pies stopped baking them regularly, leaving them largely remembered through vintage cookbooks and personal anecdotes. Chiffon pies are significant because they illustrate the balance between elegance and practicality in mid-century American baking. They demonstrate how home cooks combined innovation, technique, and presentation to create memorable desserts. Remembering chiffon pies preserves a piece of culinary history that values artistry, ingenuity, and shared experience. Each slice represents not just flavor but a cultural moment in which desserts were designed to impress, delight, and create lasting memories at the family table. Pineapple cheese pie. Pineapple cheese pie was a distinctive dessert that gained popularity in American homes during the 1960s and 1970s. Unlike modern cheesecakes, this pie combined a light, creamy cheese filling with sweetened crushed pineapple, often set in a pre-baked or graham cracker crust. It was not only visually appealing but also offered a balanced flavor, blending tangy and sweet notes in a single slice. Families served it during holidays, potlucks, and weekend dinners, where it became both a conversation starter and a memorable centerpiece. This dessert represents the creativity and practicality of mid-century American baking. Home cooks sought to create desserts that were both economical and impressive. Canned pineapple was widely available and added natural sweetness and moisture, reducing the need for additional sugar or fat. The cheese filling, typically cream cheese or cottage cheese, provided richness while remaining easy to prepare. Children and adults alike enjoyed the refreshing, tropical flavor that contrasted with heavier, chocolate-based desserts common at the time. Despite its widespread appeal, pineapple cheese pie gradually fell out of favor. Changing dessert trends, including the increasing popularity of individual-sized treats, gelatin-based desserts, and chocolate-dominated confections, led families to bake it less frequently. Its preparation, though not difficult, required time and attention that many preferred to spend on faster, simpler options. As a result, this once-beloved pie became largely forgotten, surviving mostly in vintage cookbooks and nostalgic family memories. The pineapple cheese pie is significant because it illustrates how American families combined resourcefulness, flavor, and presentation in dessert making. Each slice reflects ingenuity, practicality, and an understanding of texture and taste. By remembering this dessert, we honor a tradition of thoughtful home baking, where creativity and care produced desserts that were more than food. They were a shared experience and a cultural touchstone of mid-century American life. Magic custard squares. Magic custard squares were a unique dessert of the 1960s and 1970s, known for their intriguing ability to separate into distinct layers during baking. A single batter would transform in the oven into 3 visible layers: a custard base, a creamy middle, and a light sponge top. Families were fascinated by this transformation, often presenting the dessert as a conversation starter and a display of baking skill. It was not merely a sweet treat, it was a culinary curiosity that delighted both children and adults. This dessert exemplifies the experimental spirit of mid-century American home baking. Recipes were designed to surprise, using basic ingredients such as milk, eggs, sugar, and flour, yet producing results that seemed almost magical. Bakers were encouraged to observe the transformation, which created anticipation and engagement. The dessert required patience and care, as precise mixing and baking were essential to achieve the signature layered effect. Its novelty made it a memorable addition to birthdays, holiday dinners, and family gatherings. Despite its charm, magic custard squares gradually disappeared from family kitchens. Changing tastes, the rise of faster, prepackaged desserts, and the increasing preference for simpler, more predictable cakes and pies contributed to its decline. Many who had once enjoyed the layered custard as children later found it unfamiliar or overly complicated. Today, it is primarily preserved in vintage cookbooks and personal recollections. The significance of magic custard squares lies in their combination of simplicity and ingenuity. They represent an era when American home cooks valued both experimentation and presentation. Each square tells a story of curiosity, skill, and shared delight at the table. Remembering this dessert preserves a piece of culinary history where baking was an art, a science, and a source of wonder. Magic custard squares remind us that even simple ingredients, when approached creatively, can produce extraordinary results and lasting memories.